I'll see it.
Adrian, did you send us the agenda?
I sent you a link to it
There you go.
on Friday in your email.
Well,
But don't worry about it. We don't have a whole lot of handouts with it.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, I just.
And Ryan is not going to be able to join us tonight, so we've got everybody
Oh, okay.
here. So we're ready to start whenever
yep,
you
we're ready to start. All right, let's
It's
go.
gonna be on TV,
Yeah.
right?
Live broadcast.
All right. Let's call meeting to order.
Thank you, Mayor. And as a reminder, we are live streaming this, so as soon as, did you get the thing pressed? Okay, so we are live streaming and it's being recorded for the website. Before we begin, we do need to add one item to the agenda, and that is a resolution approving the financing terms with BB&T for our interim construction financing for the Public Works renovation project. Michelle, do you want to add anything to this?
Just, you know, the LGC approved BB&T to run the construction on everything. We just had not done the actual resolution for BB&T for the closing of it. So we needed to sign it.
So you need a motion to add that to the regular agenda?
Yes, a motion added to the regular agenda, and then we'll need a motion to approve it.
Motion to add.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Added to the agenda.
All right, so the first item is the resolution approving the construction loan financing terms of BB&T. I emailed this out earlier today. These are required when we do these loans. And again, we've already been approved for this financing.
Right.
This is for the construction loan.
So we should make a motion to approve
This resolution.
BB&T for the loan?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to do that.
Got a motion to approve BB&T?
I'll second it.
Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries it.
Thanks. Another engagement. Thank you. The second item on the agenda is the last one that we'll actually need action on. The rest are all going to be just discussion items. But this is to reconsider the award of contract for the Davis Park tennis courts. I'll ask David to come up and explain this. We sort of had to drop back and punt after the October 1st council meeting. The quotes we had were not apples to apples quotes. So, but I'll let David explain where we are.
Thank you, Adrian. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Yeah.
Last month you approved the awarding of the bids for the Davis Park tennis courts, and we had 4 bidders. We only had 2 that would accept those bids. And like anything else, we made a mistake by looking at the court. We didn't ask for anything specific. We just wanted our tennis courts resurfaced, and we wanted a new court. So when we took the low bid, the gentleman, Carolina Court Works, called us back to let us know real quickly that we weren't receiving apples to apples. So I asked him to explain what the apples were, and he said, well, what they're doing is they're giving you an 1.5 inch asphalt overlay, and what I'm doing is I'm going to grind up your court that's there now, completely grind it up, mix it in with 3 inches of ABC stone, and pave over it, and then do the acrylic surface. So you're getting an entirely new court, not an overlay. So I thanked Mr. Powell for that, and I said, okay. I said, so what do you need from us? He said, well, I think you'd be smart. You'd put out some specs so we could send you that, quote, apples for apples. So we took the best of both quotes from Queen City Builders and also Carolina Court Works, and we took those and we did a spec sheet, which I have on the back, which asked that we would grind up the court in place, the current stone and asphalt that's there, and then put 3 inches of ABC stone over that, pack it, roll it, asphalt it, and paint it in acrylic. So when we did that, Queen City Builders came back. They said, no, we can't bid on that. He said, we're already at your budget right now. Our budget was $150,000. He said, you're asking for a lot of money when you do that. He said, we were just going to give you an overlay. And I said, I understand that, but I said, can you grind it up, put the ABC stone in, and do it like on the specs? He said, not at that price. So I said, well, what are you looking at? He said, maybe $220,000. And we don't have that kind of money. Yeah. And we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We just want to get a brand new court down.
Yeah.
So Carolina Court Works came back and quoted us their original quote, which is $127,400. And with that price, they are going to grind up the court in place, add 3 inches of ABC stone, pack it, roll it, 2 inches of asphalt on top of that. So with that said, our original bid was like $122,500, and this quote comes to $127,400. And so we're asking that you accept that price from Carolina Court Works. Number one, they're the only bidders we got now, because the other pulled out. But we know we're going to get a brand new court, and we stay well within the budget that the council approved. And I've talked to Mr. Ben Powell, the owner, and I understand he's probably done 60 or 70 tennis courts throughout the area. So he's very highly recommended for the work he does. And if Leanna, if you want to speak on behalf of Mr. Powell, since you know him, and I have met him out there on the site twice, but I feel good with the quote that he's offering, and I think we will get a much better court than we would have if we'd have stayed with the other company. Okay, so Leanna, you have any questions, or anyone have any questions?
Is there anything that goes over the asphalt? Or is it just an asphalt surface?
It's a 2-inch asphalt surface, just like you would a street or highway. We're getting 5 inches, in his case, we're getting 5 inches of stone, packed and rolled, compacted to 95%, and then 2 inches of asphalt.
Okay.
So, and then on top of that, some acrylic coating,
Okay.
and then on top of that will be the painting and the striping. So, had we gone with the other bidder, we would have been good probably for 5 years, or somewhere in the 5 to 6 year range. They all have a 1-year warranty. But with Carolina Court Works, he's the one that did the court 12 years?
Yeah, about
14 years ago. So he says we'll get that again with this quote. We'll get at least a good 10 years out of this service. At least a good 10 years out of it.
I think that's more in line with what I thought I'd heard originally, is that they were going to have to grind it up.
Yes.
And go down to the core.
And I apologize, we did not, we just asked for a quote. We didn't have any specific specs when we did that. We just said, give us a quote on changing the tennis courts. But after going back and looking at that, as soon as we saw the 1.5-inch overlay, we knew right then, okay, no, he's correct, we're not doing apples to apples. We want a new court, not an overlay.
That's
And
pretty good.
with the overlay, you know, if you saw the photographs in the paper a couple of weeks ago, we have a lot of huge cracks in
Yeah.
that. Well, see, that wouldn't take away that. That would cover it up
Yeah.
and would look brand new, but those cracks would still be under there. This way, all that goes away.
So gone. That's pretty good price too.
And he really wanted,
Yeah.
he really wanted to go with the $144,000 quote that he gave us the first time. But that included removing the fence. And that's a $17,500 option that I personally chose, that we don't need that. Our fence is in good shape. We just want to paint it. We want to leave it in place. He's going to take out enough sections to get his equipment in there.
Good.
But we felt like there was no need in replacing the fence. We're going to have it painted, and Danny Green will do that for us. And he does our other
I know
fencing.
Danny, yeah.
So he does a good job. So the fence will look brand new. No sense in pulling that, because it's not weavy, it's not rusted, it's not wobbly.
Pretty solid.
It's solid. So we felt like the fence should stay, and we didn't need to pay that $17,500.
All right.
Adrian, I had one question. I don't have a problem with this. Does that meet our guidelines as far as competitive bidding and that kind of procedure?
Yes, sir, because we did reach out to multiple.
So we're fine with that?
Yes, sir.
That can't be questioned?
Right.
But we went after, we had 4 bidders.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that that's not something that's going to be questioned.
Yeah, this is in the level of informal bids.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions they want to ask David or Leanna or anybody? You want to make a motion that we approve Carolina Court Builders?
Sure. I'll make that motion.
Don't we need a motion to rescind?
To rescind the previous award.
All right.
Motion to rescind.
All right.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I now motion to go ahead and approve.
Motion to
Carolina Court
approve.
Builders.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, very good.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
David, you bet.
Thank
We're
you.
going to
I think
get
that'll
some
work out
nice
great.
looking court.
Thank you.
I know it'd be nice to get it done, right, Leanna?
Yes, sir.
Been waiting a while for that, haven't you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
You betcha. Okay. All right.
All right,
Next
so-
item.
So that's the only action that we need for tonight. The rest of these are just some discussion things that we've been working on.
right.
The next item is a discussion on an update to our personnel policy regarding longevity pay. And I'll let our Human Resources Director, Ms. Deborah Brown, explain this request.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
You bet.
As indicated in the memo you received from Adrian and myself regarding the longevity pay, it came to our knowledge that this had happened many years ago. It's been about 20 years since this was enacted. And over the last few years, since we've had new employees to come aboard, they have always questioned why they had to wait for an extended period before they received the longevity pay. And as described in the memo, if an employee is hired prior to June 30th, they are not eligible for the longevity pay, which is the minimum of $250, until they have been here at least a year on the next year. So if you came in on June 29th, then the following year you would be eligible for it. But if you came anytime after July 1, you wouldn't be eligible until like 2.5 years, almost 3 years, 2.5, right at 2.5 years. So with that being said, I am proposing, after discussions from our staff as well, that we change the policy from, with the waiting period from up to November the 30th. As long as you're hired prior to November the 30th, you will be eligible for the $250 minimum longevity effective that next December, that following December. And that will be a happy note for a lot of our employees. So there will be no more waiting period during that time.
Do you think it would help with the retention?
I don't know if it would help with the retention, but it would help with the morale instead of waiting 2 years before you, 2.5 years before you receive it.
Okay.
Because it also impacted me. I can still remember it 12 years ago. I was going to the dinners and several others when we would have the employee dinner or luncheon, and you weren't receiving anything. So it would just take us from being low morale to high morale. You know, if I was hired on, say, November the 29th and come in a few weeks and say, oh, I get a bonus, you know, I get the longevity pay.
Is there gonna be that much money involved in that?
Also in the study, Michelle did a scenario for us. She gave you the current base. For this fiscal year, it would only be an additional $5,050 that it would impact it, and we have it broken out in each department, what we currently budgeted and what the budget impact will be on each department.
Okay.
And that's $1,700 in the total general fund departments and $3,350 in the water and sewer fund departments.
Okay.
So you could get hired in that same year, receive longevity pay.
Yes, anytime up to November 30th, because we usually have our employee luncheon the first Friday, sometimes the second Friday in December. So like I stated, if you hire any day up to November the 30th, you can be here a week and receive the $250 minimum.
Should you not, let me just ask you, just off the top of my head, should you not be vested or have some longevity before you receive longevity pay?
Yeah, if it's called longevity, if you said to me, a longevity award, I'm thinking at least 10 years plus. Being here 1 month and December comes up, you got hired in November and December comes up and I get $250 for longevity pay, that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, yes, that's the wording that they've always had it as far as longevity. Yeah, as far as the name, we could change it, because I think one time it was called a
Yeah,
Christmas bonus.
maybe it's, yeah, I was gonna say, it can't be
Yeah,
longevity,
they
it's gotta be
changed it
year-end
to-
bonus or
yeah,
something.
right, they had it that way
Yeah.
before, when they changed it from Christmas bonus, and, but longevity is what, because it's based on the years of service from, and if you see in there, I changed it from 0 to 4 years at minimum of $250, and after the 4th year, you add $50 per year thereafter.
So tell me what the purpose of longevity pay is. I would receive it every year?
So it's been something that we've had for
It's for retention.
a long time.
A long time.
And as I understand it, when it used to be that it was 3% of your salary. You got it, it was essentially a Christmas bonus. And that was changed, I think, when Barry was hired. They changed it to the current system of $250 as a flat rate, and that's what you get for each of your first 4 years. You get $250 a year, and if you make it to year 5, it's $300, because you add $50 per year to your longevity, up to a maximum of $1,250, which you have to be here about 20 years to get $1,250.
Yeah, what about the possibilities if somebody just gets hired, that we give a prorated amount as a Christmas bonus? That would make more sense to me.
Here's your $8 for last month. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be,
Okay, but say again why somebody was having to wait 2.5 years in orders. To me, if you're in November, you wait till the next December, you don't get this December. But tell me again why it was 2.5 years?
Well, say, me, for instance, I was hired on September the 20th. So I came in that first December, I was here 3 months, and didn't receive it.
Okay.
So then the next year came around, June 30th, I was not here a year. You had to be here a year by June 30th. So I didn't receive it that following December. So that's a year and a half.
Right.
So then the next year, I finally got it. I had to wait 2.5 years before, almost 2.5 years before received.
So what we're trying to do is.
But it's called longevity.
Right.
Yes,
But we
so
want to
then-
reduce the time it takes to be eligible to get it.
Just
Yeah,
change
but
the
I don't
waiting
think,
time.
I think, I'm agreeing with him, if I'm hired in November, I don't think I deserve a Christmas bonus, or whatever we're talking about, because there is no, I'm okay with the next December you doing it, but I don't know how you want to word that, but that makes better sense to me.
Once I said, you might prorate it, give them $100 or something like that.
You know, I'm kind of like Martha. When I think of longevity, that seems to imply to me that I'm here a certain period of time. I know in the cases where I've received it, it's been extra 5 years or something, but I don't have a problem with it. So they're eligible for $250, they're eligible for longevity. They're also eligible for a bonus, and they also get any kind of COLA or pay increase. So what you're saying is someone who is here a year gets a bonus at Christmas? Is that what you're saying, or is it longevity?
The longevity, the terminology has changed. It used to be Christmas bonus, now it's longevity pay.
Right.
And it's designed to reward you for years of service. So
That the checks we hand out at the banquet.
Yes, it is, yes, sir.
At the Legion.
At our Christmas luncheon. So what we're trying to do is trying to reduce sort of that maximum
Waiting
period before you're eligible to get it, because it can be 2 years before you're eligible to get it for your year 1 service.
Yeah.
So, if you don't like this setup, if you think that's too soon, and maybe as long as you were on the payroll by June 30th, and you would get it for that December, so that you've at least been, or that you've been here a full year.
I like that better.
So as long as you've been here a full year.
As of November the
I think you
30th.
have to, I think you have
That's what I think
to
makes
be
better
vested
sense.
somewhat. Don't you? You have to have some sort of vestment more
Well,
than,
our investment on the, for city benefits are 5 years. 5 years vested on that with Prudential and things of that nature. So,
Yeah, I like the idea of the 1 year,
If you've
by
been here
November 30th.
for at least 1 full year.
I'll buy
That
that.
makes
Then you'd be
more
eligible.
business sense anyway.
I'll buy that.
I agree with Martha. They should be here at least a full year.
All right.
So if we were to bring back a change to this at the November council meeting to say that, we'll figure out the wording and I'll send it out to you in an email before the meeting. Change the wording so that you'd be eligible as long as you've been here a full
Year
calendar
as
year
of November
as of-
30th.
Yes.
now, is there
The
any
worst The
grandfathering?
worst scenario of that is that if they were here a year and 4 months, a year and 3 months, or it's not going to put them beyond 2
Right, that's
years.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
no grandfathering. No, we would just start where we are. There would be no grandfathering.
So there could, we've added staffs and we've had turnovers. We've got some new staff, so they may be eligible for it either this year or next year, whereas it could be that they would be 2 years away before they could get it.
Yeah.
What was the payout on something like that last year citywide?
It was on the.
We budgeted $50,500 total for this. that's already budgeted. You know, it's spread out to the different departments.
That's where the difference, if we change this, we'll have to figure the numbers out now for the November the 30th.
Right.
But with the no waiting period, it was only going to be a $5,050 increase from the $50,500.
So does it sound like there's consensus to do it as long as you've been here at least a year by
least a
November
year.
30th?
I'm good with
I
that.
think that's a little more equity, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
This will certainly help with our newly hired employees. It's not a lot of money, but it does mean a lot to them to get it. The next item for discussion, and I wanted just to kind of give you a heads up on this. We should have the conditional use permit public hearing for the new Belmont Middle School at your November city council meeting. I think we're still working with the school system to have that ready. Because of the nature of the school, it triggered our traffic impact analysis ordinance. Obviously, we'll have a big impact on the transportation system around that area. And so we've been working with NCDOT and the school system for the better part of this year on this traffic impact analysis. Because it's working with NCDOT, the state regulates traffic improvements associated with new schools. And as I included in my memorandum, the General Assembly has changed city's authority on requiring certain traffic improvements.
Yeah.
They actually changed it twice this year.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give you a heads up that when we have our hearing, and it's quasi-judicial, so I don't want to get into the details of the site plan or try to prejudice you at all regarding that project. But under our normal TIA for a non-school development, we would have Kimley Horn identify the impact of the proposed development to the existing transportation system, and then offer solutions, recommendations for how to mitigate for those impacts, and then we would incorporate those recommendations into the overall approval, and maybe a lot of this would be off-site. With a school, it's a little different. It appears that where the General Assembly has now landed is that cities cannot require a school to perform or to provide for off-site transportation improvements or to mitigate for congestion of schools. Cities can only require safety improvements at the ingress and egress of the school. So basically where the driveway where the school would enter and exit the state transportation system. So we have identified the transportation impacts of this school. We have identified recommendations to mitigate for the impacts to the transportation system for this school, but we may not be able to legally require the school or NCDOT to fully implement all of the congestion-related impacts.
Yeah.
Only the safety impacts, and that's by statute. So I don't, and as we've been getting closer to this, I wanted you to know that kind of in the workshop setting and not in the quasi-judicial hearing setting. We have submitted the transportation impact analysis to the division of NCDOT that handles this, which is the municipal and school traffic administration or something. Yeah. Anyway, the division that reviews TIAs for schools all over the state. So they have all the data. They're reviewing it, and they probably will not have an answer for us before the conditional use permit hearing, but we would condition, one of the conditions of approval will likely say something to the effect that it must provide the transportation improvements as required by NCDOT.
You know what the volume of the transportation is on that even?
Not offhand, it's significant, and it's all in the study that Shelley will provide to you as part of the conditional use permit.
All right, but if it comes down to we need a stoplight, or the NCDOT will or will not do it, or the school will, or where is that going to fall? Whose responsibility will that be then?
So if it revolves around safe ingress or egress to the highway transportation system, then DOT would have to provide that.
Okay.
So a traffic signal at the entrance to the school is something that would be covered by the statute.
Yeah.
But, we talked about, the turn lane at the intersection of Keener and Central, for example, that would not appear to be safety related where the driveway entrance to the road is. So that would not be something that we could require.
When did we find this out? Because we've been talking about this for a while,
We
what the
have.
TIA was going to provide. I mean, did either planning and zoning or Kimley Horn, did they know this at all on the front end?
So, as I mentioned, the General Assembly has changed the rules on us since we've had the discussions with the school system on this. Prior to last year, so the statute that I provided for you says that the city can only require this, only require improvements that have to do with safety for the ingress and egress to the road network. Cities were requiring, as a condition of your approval, that you sort of waive that part of the statute, and the school system has to provide, which is, as best I can tell, how Cramerton got all the improvements associated with Stuart Cramer High School to Lakewood Road and the roundabout and all that. Is one of the conditions of approval for either your conditional use permit or your rezoning, or just your zoning permit, is that you do provide all these off-site things that statutorily you're not required to provide, but as a condition of approval you provide, as we often do with new land development projects. Then, as sometimes happens, people who feel aggrieved by some of these processes go to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly will change the rules to prohibit that. So this was changed, the general statutes were changed in 2017 that states that cities cannot use a zoning process to get a school to waive any of these conditions. And then it was changed back in the budget this year, and then rechanged again in a technical, a regulatory reform bill. So the rules changed twice this year on us. So it's something that we've been keeping up with, and the League of Municipalities has been helpful in kind of giving us some clarity as to the evolution of these rules.
So Adrian, you're giving us a heads up that the language in the conditional use would be predicated on the basis of DOT safety regulations, that we could require nothing else.
Right, we can only require what the state allows us to require. So this, this sort of, to me, the worst case scenario is we through our ordinance, we follow our ordinance, we identify congestion problems that are going to be associated with this project. We identify efforts to mitigate for those congestion problems, but then we don't have the authority to implement those. Now, what we do have is really good data to take to the MPO and to DOT to say, we need to add this in spot 6.0.
But the other thing, Adrian, however many years ago this was, probably 10 or 12 years ago, when I was at South Point, I was the one who set up for DOT to come, who revamped the whole entrance-exit situation so you didn't have everybody stacking on South Point Road. And so I think at some point we need to remind you of that, because we took the responsibility there, I did, on behalf of us and the school and the city. But the other piece of that is, when we did the stoplight, we now, because we did that, it's still in the afternoons, and so if we're going to play this piece of it, they need to look at that whole picture and still look at, doing the signal on that side of it, because all that is going to be a major mess, and that piece of it needs to be a part of it as well. So I don't know how we play that into it, but I think we need to make sure and bring that up.
So the only thing we can play is safety issues, and not a desire to add like a fourth lane or whatever it is.
Right.
Okay.
So again, I don't want to get into the details because it's quasi-judicial, but there will be significant impacts and expensive solutions. And the solution basically gets us from a safety thing to almost a STIP project that would need to be scored and as a local or regional project. Wow. So the good news is, between this TIA and the TIA for the Henry Chapel Road project, that is still stalled because of traffic concerns.
Right.
So that's important to know. Your system's working. We have really good data that we've already sent to the MPO, and that we'll be working with them, hopefully to get some improvements to South Point Road and the ancillary system funded. But it doesn't look like based on the current statutes, that we can get those improvements through the Belmont Middle School project. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but again, we only have the authority that the state gives us.
But sooner or later, with the additional traffic that's coming up and down that road, they're gonna have to do something. The state's gonna have to do something. You know that.
Right.
They can't let it ride like it's coming.
And so this is not only an issue for us with this school, this is an issue with towns,
Absolutely.
across the state that are fortunate enough to be in growing areas that need new schools. But, if you need a new school, you probably have some traffic issues.
It's a
because you're in a growing
catch-22.
area. Right.
All right.
So,
Thank you, Adrian.
wanted you to have that background as we enter into the conditional use permit hearing in November.
Okay.
And of course, we can always meet with our delegation and ask for changes to the general statutes again. So
Yeah.
the solution to this is legislative, not to our process. So thank you. Next item, wanted to give you an update on our work on trying to get some security cameras for our various parks and particularly our downtown parking lots as safety issues. And we've been working on this for a year, 4 years. So I've asked David, and he said if you want to add to it, but David, come up and I sent the proposal from Johnson Controls in your packet. It's lengthy, but I let David, and it's expensive and it's not budgeted, so I just want to introduce this idea to you and see if we want to put this into our plan for next year's budget. Because there is it's a several-month rollout to get these installed.
Thank you, Adrian. Again, thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, actually, we've been working on cameras for the city for 4 years. It goes back to the very beginning where sometimes we all make mistakes. The first mistake we made was when we built this $1.5 million complex for the Gant Park soccer. Guess what was pulled out of the price? It was the cameras. It's too expensive, we don't need that. So we didn't get that. It was pulled out. Well, the park was built, it became crowded, and next thing you know, we've got literally thousands of people at that park. So Reba and I ended up putting cameras in that park at a cost to the city of about $20,000. So again, we built another park, Lofton. We asked for cameras there, and sometimes we don't do a good job of relaying the information to you guys that you should get, because we have a tendency to look at that low dollar and fly to the moon on the lowest penny. So again, we asked for cameras at Lofton Park, there at the boat canoe launch and the boat landing. And again, that was pulled out, and those cameras were expensive because of the area it covers. So there was another $50,000 or so that was pulled out of that contract. Same thing with Stowe Park. Reba and I ended up putting cameras in Stowe Park several years ago, again at a cost of around $20,000 or $25,000. And that's worked well, but basically the city only has cameras at Gant Park and at Lofton, Gant Park and at Stowe Park. So Zip and I have been working with the vendors for the last 3 years. We've worked through Alarm South out of Statesville, North Carolina. We've worked with Verizon, came in and met with us for several months. And then this last, we've talked to CPI Security. Can't afford them. They're just off the charts. Good people, but extremely expensive. So we met with these people, and I know everyone's familiar with the name Johnson Control. And so we had Johnson Control and their staff come in, and they do specialize in controls and factory and industry, and they do specialize in cameras, high resolution cameras. These cameras pick up day and night. They're not wireless, they're hardwired, they're hard driven. And they basically have given us pricing for the areas that Zip and I and Adrian and a couple other staff members have asked for. Doesn't come cheap. I believe it's $64,000 annually. But the thing with Johnson Control is they will lease the cameras to us. They're cameras. They lease them, they put them in, it's theirs, they take care of all the high-tech changes that may happen over the next 4 or 5 years. They do a 5-year lease program. and they put them in. The only thing we have to do as the city is we have to furnish the wooden poles at all the locations, because technically Duke doesn't really allow other cameras and other power units mounted to their poles. They have a program, but it's not a good one. So the best thing to do is the city would go in and buy the poles. We put them in. We have Stroop Electric could put them in. But those poles, and there's probably 20 of them, those poles would probably put in and everything's less than probably $10,000. So the poles would be ours, and they would be there forever. So we've asked Johnson Control. They came out and gave us quotes in this book for I think about 8 parks and 4 parking areas for the city of Belmont, public parking areas. I asked them today in an email, would they lease these cameras to us instead of signing a complete agreement for 5 years for the whole package? Could we maybe start out and go to the primary parks that we need cameras, which would be Lofton Boat Landing, Lofton Canoe Launch, Stowe Park. That's why we have one camera, and it's up there at the top. It's a picnic shelter, and it picks up hardly nothing. And then Reed Park. So we have a couple of areas that we would like to immediately have some type of security. The recommendation for Lofton Park comes from Chief Hawkins. He's saying that in light of the things that's happened throughout the county with the Maddox boy a couple of last month, they didn't have cameras. We had cameras. And that said, we have issues at Lofton Park. It's a beautiful park. The boat landing is 24/7, but there's issues down there that need to be recorded as people come in and people come out. It's just that simple. We need some cameras at some playgrounds. Stowe Park, we don't have a camera at the Stowe Park playground. We have one at the picnic shelter. So some of our primary areas, we don't have a camera at Reed Park. So we're asking to have council review the quotes that we've got from Johnson Control. We can give you a breakdown on those, but we can either do that and get started now, or we can wait until July. And then, of course, we'll propose that to the city manager in our budget workshops, which we always start in January. But that's the reason of the quotes and the prices. I think you've got those prices. So that's where we stand with the cameras.
So basically, it's a safety and a vandalism type issue.
It's safety.
Safety.
It's public
Primarily.
safety. It's just public safety. We don't have any cameras in any of our public parking lots. We don't even have a camera here at City Hall. My truck got hit 3 weeks ago here at City Hall.
Really?
Yeah, someone backed into it, but had I had a camera, I could have found the person, but we just don't
How
have
do they
it.
monitor that?
It's monitored in 48-day cycles. It's done on a computer software package, and you can also monitor off your phone, your iPhones.
So it can be monitored, because I know the cameras you have now can't be monitored
Right.
unless you want to go and look at it.
Yeah, no, these will be ready accessible for your iPhone. Those that are approved to lock in to look at them. So not everybody can look at them, but
And
we
I
will
would
have that.
remind you, there is a camera on the statue.
Right.
Yes, and that's private, and that's come in handy twice. You know, where we had the people that pulled the fence down.
Right.
Wow.
So, and we used to have a camera at the Stowe Park Playground, but when the gazebo went away, that camera went away.
So under this system, if you had an access code, you could look at it on your computer here?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's a whole lot better than going down there and pulling it off on a device and having to go back and, because the one down at the statue, you'd have to go to Vince's and you'd have to run it back and look and all this stuff.
And if you recall, maybe last year, we had an issue down at the boat landing where we spent a ton of staff time because there was an empty wheelchair at the edge of the river. And
Scary.
the thought was somebody fell out of the wheelchair and is in the river, and it turned out there was a whole backstory to that, which we didn't find out for a while because it's interesting story. But we invested a lot of time and staff time down there, which could have been avoided had we had a camera and we could have seen what actually happened.
Right.
So, The idea is the cameras aren't going to catch people doing something in the act, but they're going to, once we see what's going on, then we can go back and we can check license plates. We can piece it back together, and it's going to help us with staff time. But it's also is a deterrent, certainly, to bad behavior. If you've got a well-lit parking lot downtown with a camera on it, and your activities are being reported.
And it can protect you from a lawsuit too, if you have.
Is there any live monitoring of this, or is it just the data stored if there's an incident?
No, it's live monitoring.
Who's monitoring it live?
It could be live
Yeah,
monitored,
you
certainly.
could, it's an option,
Right.
but we just want the daily recording.
We don't have the staff to just sit there and
Right.
look at it,
Sure.
because we don't have a 911 center.
But that's an option you could get, but we just need the daily recording. And again, like I said, Johnson Controls specializes, and one thing I like about their program is, again, technology changes year to year. We all know that. And Johnson, these cameras are theirs. They're not ours. We lease them. So if the only thing happens if someone knocks them out with a baseball bat or something, yeah, we have to pay to have it replaced. But if it changes due to technology or bad resolution or whatever, they replace those cameras on their dollar, not ours. So we're leasing these through them on a 5-year program. So they keep up with all the technology.
64,000 is for the 5 years or yearly?
That's annual.
Annual. I did get a quote from along south. Their cameras were around $200,000 for the locations we're talking about here today. But it did include the hardware and the hard drives and the computer, laptops and things we would need. So as you can see, it can get up there fairly expensive, particularly the areas that we're asking for.
Yeah, we actually did a test through Verizon and for a low-cost solution, and it wasn't what I mean. It was just the quality so bad you couldn't pick it up.
Yeah.
So the question is, could the city potentially end up being liable for something that happens in a parking lot or at the park where we get sued?
Potentially.
It would probably be an extreme case that would have been put on notice about and didn't act, but just right now, I can't think of one. Plus, we have liability insurance and cover most everything. But I mean, I think the wave of it is to go to security, so for identification purposes and to limit any potential liability, or at least identify the source of that as not being something that the city was negligent about.
Yeah, I mean, the question I have is the return on investment. I mean, if there's the risk that says it's worth $65,000 a year to put it in, then yeah, we put it in. If the risk isn't $65,000 a year, then maybe we don't put it in.
Well, I mean, it's also an unbudgeted item, and, you know, Ryan made a good point last month with the accounting software. I know we need it. That was also an unbudgeted item, and unbudgeted items will wreak havoc on our budget that we approve, so it's something to take
Adrian, you're
into
just providing
consideration.
this as information and not action, aren't you?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
we're taking
you know, I'm just-
information.
I'm identifying a need that we have and a potential solution for you, and if there's interest in moving forward with it, then we'd bring it up during the budget time, but there is a several-month rollout period that if we want to have this.
Don't get me
ready
wrong,
next year.
I'm all in favor of it. I mean, I'm questioning whether it's a nicety or a necessity. I mean, that's really what I'm coming down to. Is it a nicety or a necessity? If it's a necessity, then we need to figure out how to pay for it.
Right.
If it's a nicety, then maybe it doesn't raise up this year on the list.
I think it's probably a necessity at our high-traffic areas, the River Park, the boat landing, this Glenway parking lot, probably Stowe Park.
Stowe Park.
It's probably, so we went ahead and just got a quote for everything.
Yeah.
And so
Is
we could
it-
break it down, so it's probably a nicety at Frady Field,
Yes.
you know, Rodden.
Right, yeah.
Is the need data-driven? I mean, are we recording incidents there, the police?
No,
whoever?
we haven't had any major incidents, other than, we know some activity is going on at the boat landing at night, not in the daytime, but at night, and it's open 24/7. And it's unsecured, so people go in and out as they please. A lot of that activity we know is coming from Charlotte. The chief would tell you that. But to Stowe Park, for example, we had 1,000 people there Saturday night.
Yes.
We had 1,000 people, and the playground was packed.
Yeah.
But no camera there to see what, if anything were to happen, we would have no recollection of what happened or how, other than the camera that may have picked it up from the fighting.
But let's go down to River Park again. There may be some action happening down there that we don't want.
Right.
But if
Correct.
we're not monitoring it instantaneously, we're not going to be able to address it instantaneously. I mean, if
That's
it's drug dealing that's taking place or whatever,
Yes.
what are we going to do when it's, the transaction's over and they're gone and
Yeah.
we look at it 42 days later? I mean,
Yeah, so, there, and I would defer to the chief on that. Right now, we've got no way of knowing what's going on down there.
Other than, so this may be compiling information
Yes.
if someone's going to look at it.
And we did have an issue that the police were able to address and remediate where it was becoming a bit of a truck stop down there. And so we were able to take care of that. But if we're having people there overnight, we'll be able to get their license plate coming in, license plate coming out, and then we can identify who's doing this. and address
It
that.
could be a potential criminal that had been released or whatever the case may be in our area that's a dangerous person.
Right.
Adrian, I'd like to recommend that you discuss with staff, come up with priorities. If you feel like it's essential to bring it back to us at budget time and determine what the priorities would be. I certainly, personally think we need to monitor the playground with young children there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would leave that up to staff to come back to us with a proposal, what you think would be appropriate.
And we do have those. broken-
Ideally, I would
we do have those
love all the
broken
parks
down
to
in
be,
priorities for this
have
review.
security,
Yeah.
or, monitoring. The question is, then you guys just got to figure out how to pay for it. If you figure out how to pay for it, I'm all in.
So what I'm hearing is that staff will come up with kind of our priority list of the cameras, the
Right.
locations that we need cameras, and we'll bring it back to you in January when we start our budget
Yeah.
Okay.
discussions.
Perfect.
That sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dave.
for understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item for discussion is an update from our historic preservation discussions that we've had. We had a workshop on August 20th down at the Kimbrell campus of Gaston College. There was a joint meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission. We had Amber, I think her name was, from the state come down and talk about general statutes and historic preservation and historic landmarks. The direction that we received from you was, let's focus on historic landmarks and voluntary landmarks. So our ordinance that we've had for 20 years or more basically outlines all of the authority that a preservation commission has in general statute. So it's landmarking as well as potential local historic district. We have a historic preservation overlay district in our zoning ordinance. We've just never applied it on the zoning map. So the concern was if you have a commission, you have an overlay district, and you have this authority in your ordinance, can you tell the Preservation Commission only use a portion of your authority, don't use all your authority, even though they have the authority? So the council asked us to take a look at the ordinance and let's see if we need to make any changes to the ordinance so that instead of having a local historic preservation commission, we can have a local historic landmarks commission that processes these voluntary applications for landmark designation. So the planning department has been researching that since that workshop, and I'll let Alec Robinson give you an update.
Pretty much it. Thank you, Adrian. Good evening, council. You covered the introduction perfectly. As a bit of background, and most of you know this information, in 2014 we had an ad hoc study committee that studied on the issue for several months, and they ended up coming up with a recommendation that we implement a neighborhood conservation overlay district as our initial toe in the water in terms of historic preservation. Changes in the from the General Assembly made this a less viable option after that. So in January of 2018, you appointed an Historic Preservation Commission in order to implement the ordinance that we had in place. That commission met for from early this year to mid this year. And as Adrian said, as a result of the August meeting, City Council postponed future commission meetings until we could look at the issue. A little bit of controversy involved, in, as you know. Our existing situation, the LDC has the overlay district outlined in Chapter 5. The commission itself in Section 19.5 definition in Chapter 2, and then the process for certificates of appropriateness is in Section 18.5. And as said, the ordinances give full authority to a commission that would implement the 10 or 11 things that the general statutes enable. Our local regulations, in other words, our zoning code is currently consistent with the state model, and provided that we do want a commission with full statutory authority. The duties, if we decide to go the route of a local historic landmark commission only, we believe we would take voluntary nominations only, and consider certificates of appropriateness as needed, and then we would have a public education component for the program. If you do decide to designate locally, this would mean revision or possible rescission of chapters in the LDC. We would have to coordinate any transition with the state and Gaston County. There would be a public input process with at least 2 meetings. And of course, it would go through the planning board. They would issue their recommendation, and final decision would come to y'all. We would have to, if implemented, consider funding sources and staffing issues. We would have to establish the process, and that could have individual variabilities in it. And we estimate a timeline of about a year in order to do this. It is currently handled by Gaston County planning staff, and with a large amount of help and input from Lucy Penninger. The property owner currently usually bears the cost of research and associated paperwork when nominations are presented. It's reviewed by the commission, which is chaired by John Russell, a local resident, and a recommendation is made by City Council and ultimately ratified by the county commissioners. Ms. Penninger says that this process takes a minimum of 6 months. We try to come up with some pros and cons. This is not a complete list. It's subjective. These are possibilities. We don't know actual outcomes. But nominating and approving locally would give us local control. There would be less bureaucracy with Gaston County being eliminated from the process. It could stabilize and increase property values. There are studies that have indicated this is possible. Whether it would happen in Belmont, again, these are possibilities. Pride in the community could be increased. We would have a local board, local persons that we hope would have a greater interest in local structures and houses. Destination tourism could be enhanced if we find that this process is streamlined or otherwise made more available. We think there could be opportunities for synergies with other programs. And the Main Street comes to mind, and the process could help preserve the city's heritage. Admittedly, some of this is going to occur anyway if we don't change anything. In other words, do it through the county. Some of the cons, briefly, no current funding sources. We would have to look at an operating budget, commission training. Would the commission need an attorney? Presumably, we would have to update our inventory of historic structures. Current staff has little experience in this area. Phil Bogan, the new downtown director, would be a resource, but locally, we don't have anybody on the order of a Lucy Pinniger. Again, what would the impact on current staff be? Would we need to have a person that had some experience? Excuse me, some experience. Ideally, we would have some commission members with experience in one area or another. And key consideration is that we're currently receiving this at no charge from the county. There's no way of knowing how many nominations we would process if we implement this. I don't think we're doing even one a year currently. And this would leave us with a board that would have gaps of time between the actual work that they do. So that's, in summation, my presentation, our presentation. I'd be happy to try to answer questions. Again, this is putting it forth and deciding, or not deciding, rather tonight, what we actually do.
So my understanding, when we put this board in place, I didn't realize, because I don't know that it was presented well enough, the power that they would have. I thought we were putting a board together that would, like, promote, come see historic Belmont, and that they couldn't, restrict what you could do with your property and so forth like that. I thought it was more of a PR kind of a commission than a regulatory commission. I don't think we want a regulatory commission, but I'll also say this. We've reached out to Gaston County numerous times, and Lucy Pinniger personally numerous times, to help us with our property, and like zero response. So I don't know, it's always, yeah, let's do it, but there's no initiative on their end. Let's help you. Let me show you how to do it. Let me help you. So I'm not impressed with Gaston County's board. So I don't know if we may be able to do better than that, but either we need to put the pressure on Gaston County to step up and do a little better job, or we put this thing together with just our local folks. I'm not interested in giving them, the full authority of what a historic commission defined by, whatever, in terms of putting regulations of what you can and can't do with your property together.
You go with the landmark?
But, oh yeah, I think that's great. I think it should be a PR thing. It should be a marketing tool, not a, and if people want to, if people are interested in putting their property on, as a historic property, they should be able to reach out to this group, and they help them, navigate how to do that. So, that's my thoughts on the issue. If we don't, I am definitely don't want to give them like this full commission rights. I viewed this as a historic committee, if you will, where they were more of a marketing tool.
So what I'm hearing, the point of issue is, do we want to do local landmark, which would take away all that other stuff, and if people voluntarily wanted to have their house declared, they would do all the research, they would come to the committee, and the committee would either recommend it or not recommend it, so the whole process would be a voluntary process. Now, the benefit of that is, Councilman Stowe said when the tree fell on her house, that they had to replace the roof in its original condition because it was considered a landmark.
Yeah.
So to me, the crux of our issue here is, do we want to do a landmark or do we not? And I guess, will Lucy Pinniger live forever?
Well, the-
We certainly hope so.
Well, in
I
conjunction
mean,
with that.
what I'm saying is, maybe we want to take this on ourselves and be able to develop our own thing and not depend on the county and that kind of thing, and I understand. So from my position is, if we're going to do anything, we'll just do the landmark thing and cut out all the other regulatory stuff, as Doug has spoken, and it will give us an opportunity over the period of time to develop a cadre of people that have some expertise, so that when I say Lucy Penninger, I certainly don't want her to pass. I understand this is being recorded, so Lucy, I'm sorry I said that. I didn't realize that. But what I'm saying is, we probably need to develop our own cadre of people with experience that are local type people. So that's the issue I see. Do we want to do landmark with our people, or do we want to say no and just stay with the county? Because it seems to me, from discussions we've had before, none of us are interested in the total part of the preservation committee.
The other question is, what services are we receiving from Gaston County? Because we waited about 20 years before we were designated. In other words, we had national historic designation, but we didn't have county designation because they didn't ever have time to work with us either. So what services are we receiving from Gaston County? Because Lucy's not that person. Who's in charge of what we're getting that we're paying for?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, because we need to find that out.
Sure. They control their process, and I guess that they have to assign priorities. They have a budget of only $5,000, and that, in this day and age, it goes pretty quick. I do, Councilman, again, I would say that I think this historic study committee was on the right track with getting our the NCOD as an initial step, but the legislature kind of set that aside, which is why we went toward the more authority process.
So I think, Adrian, what you're asking us of council, how do you want you to move forward? Do you want us to move forward in the landmark type of ordinance, or a more comprehensive thing? I think that's the question.
Right, so we just want to check back in with the city council, and we heard at the August meeting, let's take out the regulatory preservation commission component from the ordinance, and let's do historic landmarks. What we would like to, and we don't need to decide it tonight certainly, is, do we want to have a Belmont Historic Landmarks Commission that the city council appoints the members and we have that local control? Or do we want to continue our relationship with the Gaston County Historic, Landmarks Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, and they focus on the landmarks? And sort of how I view things, where you've got a county service that also provides that same service to the city, is if you're satisfied with the level of service that you're receiving from the county, then keep it. If you're not satisfied with it, then you need to supplement it with the city service. Yeah. So that then there's the question of, how much is it going to cost? Do we need to hire a historic preservation staff that's only going to work on 1 or 2 cases a year? That doesn't seem to be a good use of resources. So you can contract that out with a historic landmarks consultant, which would probably be a better way to do it. And then do you make the applicant pay for all that so that all the taxpayers aren't paying? Because, remember, at the end of the day, if you're successful with your landmark application, you get a 50% reduction in your property taxes. So should the taxpayers pay to have somebody work where the goal is to reduce the tax burden? Now there's ancillary benefits to that.
But I thought that's what this committee would do. If we're going to have some type of committee, volunteer, that want to do this, then they should do that at no cost to help residents that want to, put their property on the register. I don't think we need to pay for anything. I view this as a volunteer group that we believe in preservation, and we're willing to do legwork to help you do what you want to do.
Do y'all know if the Gaston County Historic Preservation Commission does any of that work, or do they have the county planning staff do it, or is it contracted out?
I would say it's...
I believe it's contracted out.
Well,
Well,
Luke?
Lucy said that they used the $5,000, and that was one reason they can only do so many studies per year, because they try to get as much as they can, free, of course, but ultimately it needs to satisfy the state and, yeah.
I think that I agree with you. Ideally, if you appoint a local historic landmarks commission,
Yeah.
those commission members would have the expertise and the time to do the work, so that we don't need to hire another staff person, or we don't need to carve up, another piece of a planning department staff and say, now you're taking on historic preservation in addition to everything else. And so if it's staff-led, then the staff needs to have that expertise and that training, and we don't have the expertise outside of Phil's knowledge, and he's focused on downtown. We don't have that. So ideally, your landmarks commission members could step up and do that work. But if they can't, or if membership changes over time, as all boards do, then there's going to be a cost to the city.
It sounds to me like we need to ask staff to do a little more research with regard to what are we actually getting through Gaston County, so we'll know a little bit better how to proceed.
So Adrian, I hear you speaking, so tell me what your opinion is.
So when I was under the impression that there was sort of a backlog of requests from Belmont residents to have their properties designated as a landmark, and it sounds like you may be interested in doing that, but we're not getting good service from Gaston County. They're backlogged and they can't provide that level of service to our residents. And I think we probably need to do it ourselves and help our residents.
Yeah.
As it turned out, there really wasn't that backlog of Belmont residents asking for or applying for this designation. There is a long list of Belmont properties that the county is interested in that they believe would qualify as landmarks and that deserve to be preserved. But having a list from Gaston County that they would like to at some point get to is different than having a list of Belmont residents or property owners who want it. But as Martha said, it just takes a long time because you're not getting that level of service. So I think we need to kind of flesh that out a little bit more and maybe find out exactly what is the process that Gaston County uses. And, if I want to have my house listed as a landmark and I go to the county and I say, help me through this process, what does that really entail?
Yeah. Well, I think we've got the people in place, the board, who can do the work. I don't disagree with anything anyone else has said, but without the numbers, we can't really make any kind of decision if we don't know what the costs are.
Right.
So Adrian, you say we need to put this off until you come back with us with more definite information.
So it sounds like we need to find out exactly what level of service we're getting from the county and what their process really is.
Yeah.
From the time that Councilman Gadd calls up, I guess, David Williams or Lucy Penniger and says, I want to see if my house qualifies or my property qualifies as a historic landmark, help me through the process. What actually does the county do? How long does that take, and what does it cost? And can we do that better or more quickly or more with a better customer service focus? Because the county has a small budget for this, and they have a county-wide focus. So we competing with landmarks in Cherryville, Investor City, and Gastonia. So if this is something that we want to do, and it's been a while since I looked at those statutes, but I'm sure that the marketing and the PR stuff can be part of what the Historic Landmarks Commission could do. Particularly, I think the last landmark application we had was the train depot. So that was over a year ago, and we haven't had many.
We have had multiple certificates of appropriateness that have gone through for the existing landmarks within the city, so I would say that they do at least 2 a year probably for additions and modifications of some of the existing properties citywide.
But for new applications for landmark status, there aren't many. So there's a little bit of work on that side of it to do, but probably filling in the gaps in time would be the outreach and the education.
When can we have the numbers so we can put some closure on this, as far as the cost?
I'd like to have another workshop maybe at the end of the year, and we can bring this back up to you. But what I really wanted to make sure that we still have the direction from you that we did in August of, we're not going to go through the Preservation Commission stuff. We can begin work on some text amendments to the LDC to take that authority out of the zoning ordinance.
That makes sense.
And then, by the time we're working through that, then we can come back to you with, here's why we think we need to have our own local landmarks commission, or here's why we don't think we need to have our own Belmont one, and we can continue with the county. And then here's the process for creating that landmarks commission, and here's what it's going to cost.
So I think that's what we'd have a consensus on. The only thing, once you investigate is landmark and come back with us with a process.
Yeah.
We'd have to have, you said we'd have to have a public hearing anyhow.
Yeah, because it would be an amendment to the zoning ordinance, right? So it'd go through the planning board as well as city council.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you do want to create your own, our Belmont Landmarks Commission, we'd advertise for members of the same process we did before.
So let me ask you this, where does it put the Historic Preservation folks commission?
So they're still just sort of out there. They haven't met, as far as I know, since that August 20th meeting. And I don't think the commission is dissolved, but it's just sort of inactive at this point.
They were all notified of the meeting tonight.
Okay. Yeah, we do have a list of people that asked to be notified whenever we're talking about historic stuff.
And they were, and it was about 20 people at least.
Yeah.
So we're going to notify them that we're putting it on hold, so they know what's going on?
Yeah, we can just update them based on this discussion.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Any other questions about landmarks?
No, I think we're pretty well
Thank you.
discussed it.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes, sir.
There is a Lake Wylie Marine Commission meeting at 7, so I want to try to get out of here by 6:30, 6:40 at the latest, so I'll go through the next one pretty quickly. There may be some more discussion on the final item. Sort of leading off, or taking from our last discussion about city work versus county work, I wanted to have just at least start a conversation with you about economic development and kind of the process that we currently have in our relationship with Gaston County and other agencies. So what we typically do now, we work certainly with the Gaston Chamber of Commerce, with the Montcross Chamber of Commerce, with the Greater Gaston Development Corporation on promoting Belmont economic development, meaning commercial, industrial, office development, non-residential development that we want to bring to town. Often those organizations, particularly the chambers, are sort of the points of entry for people that are interested in starting a business in town.
Yeah.
When there's a major project like the Project Bolt that we did and the Project Y2 a couple years ago, those calls, those initial inquiries go to the State Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. The staff in Raleigh sends an email blast to the Economic Development Commissions in each county, say, we've got so-and-so wants to build a 100,000 square foot facility. It's going to employ 200 people. It's going to be worth $50 million. Do you have a place in your county that would be suitable? And then the county staff sends it out to the towns, but the county sort of drives that process. And so, within Gaston County, we've gotten some projects. Most of the projects the big projects that come to Gaston County through the EDC process that I just outlined, typically go in one of the publicly owned business parks or office parks, either in Gastonia or with Gaston County. Gaston County's just purchased a new business park.
Right.
I think they approved that funding a month ago or so. So, unfortunately for us, our business park is privately owned. So we've got privately owned property that comes at a cost, competing with publicly owned property that doesn't come with a cost to the applicant. So right now we don't have anybody on staff that really handles economic development. I do by default, but I don't have any training in it. We get inquiries from on the utility side and the planning and zoning side. So between Shelley and David and Chuck and Jerry, we're all involved, and we all respond to the request for information from the EDC. So I don't really need any direction on this tonight, but just want to kind of plant a thought in your head of, do we need to have our own economic development staff person that can go out there and do the business recruitment, that can respond to these requests, but could also be proactive on these requests?
I think we definitely do.
Gastonia has done that, Mount Holly has done that, we have not.
We need to.
The GGDC, and you'll hear from Mark Kramer at your November meeting, has just completed this economic development strategic plan regarding the airport. It lays out a blueprint for how to be successful in each location in Gaston County, starting with us.
Yeah.
We don't really have anybody on staff that can go out there and beat the bushes to implement it. I'm not sure what level the EDC is going to have and the county's going to have participating in that, or other towns, but if nothing else, I'd like to have somebody that can be in charge of implementing that plan, whether it's us or the county or a combination. But I just want to be thinking about, as we get into the budget workshops and looking at staffing levels for next year, do you think, and we can have more conversation later, do you think that there's a role for the city to have in economic development? And again, I kind of go back to what I said at the last discussion. If we're satisfied with the level of service that we're receiving from the county, then we stick with that because it would appear to be working. If we want a higher level of service, then we have this to not replace what the EDC or those other agencies are doing, but to supplement the work that they're doing, and we'll be focused just on Belmont.
I was absolutely shocked the other day when I found out this was the first time those people had met the person from the EDC. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah,
Much business as they have, I just was absolutely shocked. But yeah, I think we need to get a liaison.
So,
work on our behalf.
if there's interest in us doing something, I mean, I can, and we can discuss this later, but as we get closer to the workshops and the retreat and budgets, I can put together something if we wanted to have our own person.
I think the other piece of it too is to go back to Doug, we were talking about return on investment. I want to know what Mount Holly's person or Gastonia person, what have they seen as a result of this?
Right.
Because I don't know that we have a big enough pot to play with here to make that worthwhile. I mean, I'd like to think so, but I don't know. We don't have a huge amount of land.
Right, we
So
need to understand what land we have to offer up to.
But our location is critical too.
Yeah, but you gotta have land,
I mean,
and we don't have a bunch.
and so Belmont owns squat.
Right, yes, we don't really own any land.
We need to start buying real estate or.
Right. And so, our area is the Oaks Commerce Park and then the Wilson Boulevard corridor, which is terribly underdeveloped and is a great location for new, particularly office, professional office development, vertical development, mixed use, as our conversations with CATS continue. So that's an opportunity corridor, and stuff on the peninsula is residential except for a couple of the village center. If we ever get a bridge crossing down there, then that's going to change, and you could have an office park.
I think we need to be able to say, these plots of land are available.
Yeah.
What kind of investment could go on those plots of land?
Yeah.
To understand whether the view's worth the climb in terms of us investing.
But the person that could represent us could know that stuff, so.
Okay. And we can certainly figure that out. So thank you. The final item is just, I'm going to bring back to you discussion that we had on the September 4th council meeting regarding the Gadabouts, the Senior Citizens Program. We've had a lot of conversation at the Parks and Rec Board, Parks and Rec staff, the Gadabouts meetings. I've had several conversations with city council members about it, and Parks and Rec Board members. Have spent a lot of time since September 4th on the Gadabouts. At the September 4th city council meeting, you asked for a report on the city's bus. And so we presented that information about the bus. I went back and listened to the discussion and took notes on it. That sort of, the report on the bus sort of evolved into utilization of the bus and the number of people in town served by it. Are we recouping our cost for using the bus, for going on trips, staff time, and mileage and fuel and wear and tear on the bus? You wanted us to come up with a fee structure that would cover the cost of trips that we take. There was some concern about, is the Gadabouts program as it's currently organized, is it part of the Parks and Recreation Department or is it not? Do we want to continue the program as it has been for 30 years, and it's evolved certainly, but how it's been managed, or do we want to kind of evolve the Gadabouts and make it a broader senior citizens program that does more than just trips? Because the Gadabouts do trips, and that's, the Parks and Rec Board, they were very clear. We want to go on trips. We don't care about health and wellness programming. We don't care about exercise and senior stretch. We want to go on trips, and that's fine. But there are other senior citizens who are not part of the Gadabouts who may want to have other activities as well as trips. So this is all evolved, and I'm sure you've gotten phone calls and emails and visits about things that weren't really said at that September 4th meeting, but are just out there. So there's been some miscommunication on that. So I've asked Zip since the September 4th meeting to come up with a plan for senior citizens programming, and we'll use tonight's meeting as to kind of check in with you and see if it follows the direction that you asked us to go on. Certainly not to get rid of the Gadabouts or to stop the Gadabouts or to stop trips or anything like that, but just to enhance the program that we're offering. So I'd like for Zip to come up and kind of tell you what he has found and what he's proposing.
Yes, hello, Council. Since the last meeting on the 4th, we still have currently been doing trips. Last week they went to Boone. They had 20 participants in that. They paid $4 each. The total cost of the trip was $260. That's gas and salary for the driver. It was the part-time driver, Eric Wilson. They paid us $80. It's what we got in revenue. So we're out $190. The previous trip before that, they went 8 or 10 miles. It was 17 participants. I think, long story short, we're out $80. So some of these trips are currently not paying for themselves, but neither do some of our other programs too. When we do movies in the parks, we get sponsors for those movies, but they do not pay for themselves. And some of our senior programs, senior stretch and senior line dances that we're doing, we provide all those services for the citizens of Belmont, senior citizens, but we don't have great participation in those programs. Yeah. And I've looked into it. I've called a bunch of cities and talked to them and the programs they do. I've talked to the county. I've talked to somebody in Spartanburg. I've talked to the Gaston County Health Department, Gaston County Recreation, and it is other programs out there that we could do for the city. We just need time to get those programs out there. We have done a mock schedule of education. For instance, in November, identity theft class. Identity theft is a major problem around, especially for seniors. So we're trying to do programs to address things like that and provide more services in that direction, not just trips. So kind of need some direction and see if council wants us to continue with the trips every week or kind of mix it up, have programs, training. Also, it came out from the CDC that you at least need 2 days a week of exercise, extra training. And I don't know if you're going to actually get that just riding the bus. Most of the Gadabouts do not participate in our programs. They mostly, like I said, it's the Gadabouts. They're trip based, which I don't have a problem with that. If council don't, I'll do whatever y'all want us to do. But that's the gist of everything.
So they provided a financial kind of statement the other week that said, this is what we've paid the city, this is how many miles we've traveled, we paid $210 for employee lunches.
Right. Do
you agree with those numbers?
Those numbers in those current times, maybe 10, 15 years ago it paid for itself, but like I said, the trips now.
No. The report that they gave us.
Yes.
Did you agree with those numbers?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I did the math. How many miles? Use federal government standards for 54.5 cents per mile, and I did all that math. And basically, what I came up with where they fell short was, yeah, they paid for the employee lunch, but they didn't pay for the employee time. And I made some assumptions about, I think I said 6 hours a trip, so I put 6 hours of time for an employee. Basically, what I came up with is year-to-date September, which I believe those numbers were. we're 2,000 in the hole. So my question is, do we pay 2,000, and if you extend it out for a whole year, let's just roughly round it out, $3,000 for this program for a year. So the real question is, do we pay $3,000 a month for soccer? Do we pay $3,000 a year for the soccer program? Do we pay $3,000 a year for this? Or do we need to adjust their numbers to be something more realistic of what we pay for these programs?
So
I mean, I'd love to say it's a profit center. I'd love for the rec department to be a profit center, I really would, but
If you're gonna use soccer and some of our programs as an example, those programs pay for itself. And like I stated before, the senior trips, neither do our movies in the park pay for itself, although we do get money coming in for sponsorships for the movies.
Right, so the question needs to be, is that, if every program needs to be a profit center,
and
then we need to adjust how we manage that program so that it is a profit center.
Well, I don't have a problem with I mean, you're gonna have programs that don't pay for itself, that's subsidized by the city, taxes or whatever you want to say on that part. But I want to have an exclusive program that we can offer to everybody. And right now, I don't feel like we're getting that message out to the whole citizens of Belmont. Like I said, the last 2 trips, we have 20 last week, and before that, we had only 17 people. Well, how did the other people in the community get the word? I don't think we're getting the word out there to the other citizens.
Because they're not necessarily, this is not advertised by Parks and Rec, this is advertised by just the, right.
Right.
So perhaps the thing is that the Gadabouts become a city program, not a private program that just happens to use city resources.
They are a city program. They always have been part of the city.
Well, yes, they are a city program, but they
have their own budget, finances, everything else that don't run through the city.
They do their own trips where they go and where they can go. They do everything themselves. They just come to us at the beginning of the month and say,
we want your bus for this day,
for this day and
driver.
this day.
Let me jump in and say, yeah, that's true. But it evolved. Now, Sally took care of that program to a great extent. When Reba came on board, she did not have the inclination or desire to be as involved as Sally was. So they were told basically to do what you're saying. Budget, have some leadership, plan your trips. But that did not mean that we were severing our relationship with them. It meant that we were modifying it because staff no longer wanted to be involved that deeply with them. Now, that's just a change in the nature of the terms. That's not a change in the nature of relationships. I'm always confused when it was said at council meeting that they are not part of the city. I mean, they're on our website. They've been here for 30 years. They are open to the public, and if that perception is not out there, it's because I guess we're not advertising it well enough. I mean, they're not restricting membership.
Well, I did not say that they're restricting memberships, but well, let me back up with that. In essence, they are, because if you're not a member of the Gadabouts and you come and walk off the street and say, I want to go on this particular trip, you cannot, because you got to be a member of the Gadabouts.
Yeah, but if you want to play soccer, you got to pay the entrance fee, so they've got a fee to be a Gadabout.
Yeah, but does the fee go to the Gadabouts or does the fee go to the city?
The fee don't come to us.
Right, the fee goes to their checking account.
Yeah, it don't come to us, so we don't have anything to do with that. We don't know who the members are. They do give us a list of who the members are, but like it's their program. They're doing everything on that. And like I said, I would like to have more input on where to go on these trips. I mean, I really would.
So I think the question is, what is the relationship between the group called the Gadabouts with the city? And everything changes, everything evolves, and nothing's how it used to be, and that's awful and that's exciting at the same time. So when and I'll do whatever you tell us to do. So when Sally was here, the Gadabouts was her program, and she did a fantastic job with it and put in a lot of time. She spent 2 to 3 days a week on the Gadabouts, calling them, coordinate the trips, planning the trips, coordinating reservations, calling the members, doing all that. It was a big investment in her time. And then, then Sally retired, and the Reba was our director, and we had a smaller staff then. Council and manager had other demands for the Parks and Recreation Department. We're building parks, we've got increased athletics, we need to revamp our events. She didn't have the time to put into the Gadabout, so Councilor Turner's right. She asked the Gadabouts to form sort of your advisory board. You plan the trips, you tell us where you want to go, you call and make sure that Jane can go on the trip, and if Jane can't, then Dorothy can, if Dorothy can't, then Jim will. So they had more autonomy on coordinating themselves. And I think what's happened now, and now we have, so Sally's not here, and Reba's not here, now we have Zip. And Barry's not here, you got me. And so we're trying to figure out, we're talking about accountability and cost recovery and cost benefit and everything. So, this discussion evolved from the bus to the program. So, if we want to continue having the senior citizens program that's called the Gadabouts, and we want it to be a trip-based program, and we may want to add some other activities that maybe the 74 members of the Gadabouts don't care about, but maybe the other 1,000 senior citizens do, then that's fine. But what I'd like to do is to get direction from the council. Do we want to continue with what we're currently doing and make no changes to the program? And they tell the Gadabouts plan everything, and they tell Zip where they're going, when they're going, and
how much they're going to pay for it,
how much they're going to pay for it, and what which driver it's going to be. Right. Or do we have the Parks and Rec Department take charge of the program and say, this is a program of the City of Belmont Parks and Recreation Department. These are the trips that we're going to go on. We will seek input from senior citizens on where they want to go, because we may not know where we may think they want to go may not be where they want to go. We're gonna schedule the trips. We're going to have the sign-up sheet, and we're going to try to make it fair that everybody who's interested has an equal chance in going on the trip. Yeah. And then here's what it's going to cost, and here's where we'll pick you up, and here's where you get dropped off. And so it's fully controlled by the city. It's a city program.
So on my math, I don't have a problem with the $3,000 a year that we may end up funding this program, right? What I don't, if indeed there is a membership fee to the Gadabouts that someone pays to the Gadabouts to belong to the Gadabouts, and it's not through the city, that's a major problem for me. Then that becomes a private organization that is just taking advantage of city resources, not paying for itself, that I don't think is right for the city.
I had a question about the fee, and I've heard different things. I heard that if you're in, and please help me, if you're in the city, you don't pay anything to be a part of them. If you're out of the city, they charge.
Correct.
So really, if you're in the city, you don't pay a fee to be part of the Gadabouts. I
think the only requirements to be a Gadabout, you got to attend 2 or 3 meetings.
But if you're out of the city, they charge you to come to the meetings.
Yes, technically, but anybody outside the city limits shouldn't be a member of the Gadabouts. Now, they have a grandfather from way back when. 17 people has been grandfathered into the Gadabouts that are currently outside the city limits.
So basically, they've governed themselves.
They govern themselves.
Rules and all that kind of thing.
Correct.
And I agree with Doug. If they're going to collect money on behalf of the city, a fee to be part of the Gadabouts, it needs to come through the city. I don't have a problem with them going on trips, but I do think that there needs to be a little more control of that. And I'm not saying you're going to prohibit them from going, and we may even support it, because if you look at your budget, we say that everything is a profit-based program. Well, your fees that you collect for athletics and everything doesn't match up to what your expenditures are every year. But I'm saying, that it's funny, isn't it, that we start with a conversation of wanting to buy a new bus, and we decide you can't buy a new bus, and now we're everywhere. But I think I think there has to be a meeting ground on both sides. There has to be a middle ground from the city. There has to be one from the Gadabouts. And in order for that to happen, I think that both sets of both parties need to sit down, and we need to do it in a discussion of how we move forward, and not how terrible we are to us, how you're trying to get rid of old people. And, I guess I'm old enough to join the Gadabouts.
Yes,
I don't know, I am. But I agree with Doug. If there's revenue collected on behalf of the Gadabouts, that revenue needs to be city revenue, and I don't think there would be an objection. I mean, I'm not a Gadabout.
My understanding, I talked to Neil about that. I asked him because you brought that up, and he said that revenue does go to the city.
Well, it doesn't go into our funds, does it, Adrian? They have their own funds.
What revenue are you speaking about?
The out-of-town people that pay the $25 fee.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah,
I mean, y'all have.
And somehow they end up with money to be able to give to charities and things, so where do they get that money?
Yeah, and I'm frankly...
I mean, they're collecting monies
under
a city program supposedly that the city has no control over because they're donating it to charities.
Right, I know the next event that's coming up, they've requested a tent, and they're gonna be selling raffles at that event. It's coming up for the Boo Festival, and that's part of the money that they get to collect.
So I think we've got just this hybrid thing where they're private and they're public, and we've got to figure, as Ron said, put that all together and turn it into a public program.
Do they ever have bingo or anything like that to try
No,
to generate funds?
no, there's no other things provided. It's the trips and the senior land and senior scratch, and we have low participation in those events. And also, we don't do dances anymore because we can't get anybody to come to the events. And that's the things that I'm trying to go more in the direction of, to give more diversity for more people to come out to.
Adrian, I'd like to see us somehow to blend this together and quit fighting over who does this and who does that and who said this and who said that. And I think the whole issue is we're not buying a bus. Well, now what can we do to move forward as far as revenues? If you're going to be part of the city, that revenue needs to come into the city coffers. If you want to go on trips, then we need to decide as a council or whatever it is, the number of trips, the amount of expenditure that we're willing to put into those trips, because obviously the trips don't anywhere near pay for themselves.
Right.
And I'm not saying they have to completely, but I would like to see the not old people, but I'd like to see that. I would like to see the Gadabouts come up with some kind of solution where we can continue with trips on a certain basis, and that any revenue collected would come into the city coffers to support the program. Now, if they want to put a jar over here for donations for the Leukemia Society, that's up to them. But anything collected from the Gadabouts that would come into the city, and I think all this can be done and satisfy both parties. Now, it's going to make more work on the rec department, but it's also going to make it more structured and more appropriate. I mean, that's the way I feel. I mean, I just think that things got emotional on both sides, and the idea that we're trying to do something to old people.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Doug, that we've got some kind of hybrid here, but it's just what it morphed into, because it was under full city control. Then through changes in the department heads, we are where we are now because there's been diminishing interest in being involved in that depth. So, I mean, we can resurrect that level. But, I don't have any problem with the Gadabouts. I mean, me personally, I think it should be the centerpiece. I mean, we've got an active adult community.
We do.
I do not care what Mount Holly or Gastonia do. Honest to God, I could care less. We're talking about Belmont and our seniors. They should model after what we're doing, in my opinion. And, I'll tell you something. I don't know what happened at the council meeting or thereafter, but the messaging went really awry. I don't think we said anything close to what the messaging was, because it came out, even in the weekly update, that the trips were going to be reduced. And when we talked about it, you said the trips were going to be reduced. When I went to their business meeting, I mean, I was shocked, as if you had, when you said their trips were canceled, they sent under whose authority, and you said it was Adrian Miller under the direction of City Council, and I was sitting there going, how did this messaging get here? I was trying to be discreet in the back of the room. Next thing you know, I got 40 people turning around looking at me saying, why did you cancel our trips? And I'm like, I have no recollection of that. So, I mean, I think the messaging, I mean, what the interpretation, and we've got to maybe provide some clarity here in our discussion. Like a lawyer might summarize during a trial, we've got, our discussions can be wide-ranging. We need somebody to bring us back full circle to point A and say, I think this is what we discussed and this is what we agreed on. But I mean, this spun wildly out of control quickly, I think.
Adrian, what do you need?
I'd like to get direction from the council on how you want us to proceed. We can do it. We can have Zip spend 60% of his time on the Gadabouts. That's going to come at the expense of everything else. So I need direction from y'all as to what you want us to do. Do we want to continue? I think that for both the city staff and for the members of the Gadabouts, I certainly don't want to speak for them. There's just this sort of tension and frustration right now. Yeah. And, it's a great program, and I will never say a negative word about the the experience that they're getting, they're going on these trips that maybe they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
And you get to have that socialization, which is so important when you're at that age. So I think it's a great program that we need to continue. The question is, do we want to bring it fully in-house so that we're coordinating it, we're planning it, we're in charge of it? Not because we want to be in control, but just because if it's a city program and it's for senior citizens, I feel that it needs to be for all senior citizens in Belmont. Not for, you don't need to be a member, you need to be a resident of Belmont.
How much do we?
Let's do it that way, or keep it how it is, or if that's not acceptable to this particular group, let them be totally separate and let them contract to rent the bus. And if they, I know that there's some liability issues with that, but figure that part of it out.
Right.
To me, okay, if we're doing what we do with soccer, you pay a fee to be part of the soccer stuff. Okay, you pay a fee to be part of the gadabouts. I think the money needs to come all through the city, so you offer that to everybody, whatever that fee tends to be. But to me, you still have your advisory board with the gadabouts and let them plan 2 trips a month. And then if Parks and Rec comes up with something else, then to me that we gradually may shift it the other direction. But I don't want them spending a lot of their time doing that when this group already figures out their trips.
Right.
There's a psychological benefit to it. I think the money part needs to be set up just like our soccer program and basketball and everything, so everybody's money's coming this direction. And when you give people the authority or responsibility, it's a tough thing to take it back. So I think that we set up limits, like I said, maybe 2 trips a month, which it sounds like generally that's about what they do anyway, is it, or not?
No, they do 4 trips a month.
Okay.
And they don't want to give that up.
4 trips a month. Well, I think that maybe till the end of the year we look at that, and that by that time everybody needs to sit down and say, okay, let's look at 2 or so, however we think. Maybe we back it off to 3 and let Parks and Rec do 1. But I don't think you want the responsibility at the time part of it to have to deal with it. That we still want them to do that part of it, I would think.
Well, let me say something here for what it's worth. On the trips that they go on, how much are we losing on these trips for the whole year?
About $3,000.
About $3,000 a year.
Right.
Yeah, sounds about right.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
guessing.
why don't we just raise the fee? Now, most of the people in the gadabouts are not poverty stricken. There's some that may be lower income than others, but you got some people that have a pretty good bit of money in there. And it wouldn't hurt them to pay an extra $5 or something like that to go on a trip.
Yeah, but they don't, the in-house don't pay a fee to be part of the gadabouts, is that correct?
No, what on each trip they take up money.
No, but I mean, as far as a membership fee, like you would pay
Right,
$25 to be
Mhm.
part of the gadabouts, they don't do that.
I think this is a pretty simple thing. You just say, we're going to fund the Gadabout program $3,000, $5,000 a year. This is your budget. If you spend more than that, then you've got to put that on your membership to cover that gap. But you've got, just like in business, you got $5,000 a year.
That's a good idea.
You figure out what you want to do with that $5,000 a year.
If you go over budget, you
And,
gotta pay.
and, that's a decision we need to make of what we're willing to fund for that program. It's X amount for the year. I agree that there should be a committee that says, okay, I've got $5,000 to work with. What trips do I want to do? What do I want to do? And if they add it all up and said, that's going to cost us $6,000, then we need to charge an extra, $3 a trip to everybody so that we can fund it, then that's what they do.
Leave it in a little red wagon.
So Doug, you're talking like contract with them. We're going to give you $3,000. If over that you collect your own money and you pay us, you take care of your own money? Is that what you're saying?
No.
We're going to take care of the money.
No, I understand that.
We're going to
But I'm-
subsidize them to the
But I'm
level
saying
of
if
3,000.
they spend the $3,000, they're going to have to collect money to pay for it. Who is responsible for the collection of that and the depositing of that money? You know what I'm
They're going to
saying?
need to work with ZIP and say, we've planned these trips and it's, we just exhausted our $5,000 for the year and we're still in November, so we're going to have to pony up, money for you
So
for
they're
the
gonna
rest
have
of the
to-
trips.
They're going to have to run their own treasurer then.
But they run it for soccer, they run it for baseball, they run it for
Well, they don't
tennis,
do that, do they, Adrian?
Yeah,
You talking about the staff?
They collect
No,
money.
I don't mean
Yeah.
to make this convoluted, but let's say that the $3,000 doesn't cover all the trips they want to take. So I'm going to collect $10 from Martha to cover this trip. Where does that $10 go? Does it go into, where does it go? Where's it
An
accounted
operating
for?
budget.
Where's it deposited to? Where's it receipted to?
Into Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Operating
Needs to
budget.
go to Parks and Rec.
Okay, I think that's the issue there that has to be solved.
So let me get this straight. We're setting aside, for instance, $3,000. They can go on any
This is a
trip.
proposal.
Okay,
This is-
I'm just saying-
This is no direction, this is a proposal. This is-
Whatever,
This is
whatever.
the idea.
Whatever amount of money, and they get to dictate when they go on the trips,
With that
where they go on the trips.
Yeah, with their advisory board, and
Okay.
with you a part of that. Saying,
That's gonna be-
you've got 5,000 to work with, or 3,000 to work with, this is what the city's giving you. You tell me what you want to do. And it's easy to price it out. You can price it out at, 54.5 cents or whatever the current federal rate is per mile for the vehicle. And then whatever we say the fully benefited rate of an employee is for how long the trip is in terms of it's probably going to be 5 hours. So it's 5 times, $38 an hour. And so this trip's going to cost you X amount.
I have a concern. If the city allots, say, $5,000 a year for the program, are we gonna say we need to clarify if we're gonna do it for citywide or gadabouts? If we just do it for the gadabouts, then we're getting into another liability standpoint for a private entity, because it's like we're leasing our truck or van out to this organization.
That's not what I.
But there's,
think.
they're still in a
gadabouts are
private
a city
organization.
organization.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so
Yeah,
they need to
and-
broaden their perspective as a city program, just
Right.
not for the gadabouts, because we
Right.
need to be careful on
Yeah, no,
just
no,
the
no.
gadabouts. Just say it's a city program.
City
with a
program that we're calling the
$5,000
gadabouts.
budget.
And it's open
Open
to
to
anybody
all.
55 or older in
That wants to get
in
in.
the city
Right.
limits. And you
Yep.
don't have to be a member because it's a
Nope.
city service.
Right.
Which I think it
I
always
understand
has
what you
been,
gotta
it's
pay.
just the messaging just hasn't gotten out.
Right, we have to do more marketing and things like that to get it out, as far as anyone that would like to join the
Adrian,
program or take a trip or
Adrian,
whatever.
can you take
It's
all
not
this?
necessarily join, it's just that they want to take a trip.
Adrian, can you take all this and come back with some kind of direction?
I certainly can. Let me see if I'm following what, because there's a lot of conversation.
Yeah, it brings back around.
So if I'm getting, we will create city staff will create kind of a budget for senior citizens program that we're going to call the Gadabouts. And it's going to be open to all city residents who are 55 or older, which is the age for the Gadabouts. You don't have to pay a membership fee, but it's city residents. And it'll be somewhere with $3,000, $5,000 a year that would cover the cost of the trips and the activities that we do.
Yeah.
And it will be managed by the Parks and Recreation staff, Zip or his designee. And then with advice from a senior citizen advisory board. And then, does council want to appoint that? Does Zip want to appoint that? Or do we just ask the Gadabouts to send us 3 or 4 people and let's meet with Zip once a month and let's plan out what we want to do?
The
Probably the
second thing.
simplest thing. And
But then
then,
you do a fee structure, just like for soccer, in other words, whether it's $25 a year or whatever y'all think, figure that out too, because it shouldn't be, I just walk in the door, I should have, I'm part of that program.
and then, what I think is important, and this is just me, is that this be open to all senior citizens in the city, and they all have equal opportunity to go on the trips.
Yep.
So we figure out a lottery system or whatever way so that it's not the same people going over
They have
and
to
over.
pay, they have to
And
pay.
we figure out the cost of the trip. I'm not as concerned about us recovering 100% of the cost. I think there is value in having the service.
Yeah,
So,
right.
maybe we.
The first whatever we budgeted is free, and then after that, they gotta pay.
Right.
And but I think you plan the whole year, and you make an estimate of what that is, and then you just say, well, then every trip needs to be $10 to cover that gap.
If we plan out a year and it's a $10,000 service and we're
Right.
kicking in $5,000,
Right.
then they come up with the other 5 and we come up with a fee.
Prorated on
that would
trip.
cover all
So
that.
historically, are we looking at $3,000, do we know, or is that just?
Oh, that's just a number. I don't know. It
It
could be 10,000, it could be 20,000. I don't know. We could put that in whatever the Parks Rec budget is.
I mean, that's historically correct based on their mileage and trips?
Yeah, about 3,000, 3,500, somewhere in that range.
Thank you, sir.
So does that sound like a plan that we can bring back to
Yeah.
you? And
Yeah, I think
we'll
so.
continue as is until
Yeah.
we get this new model.
I think so. Yeah.
Well,
in
talk to them
place.
about, I asked them how there was an accusation made that it was the same 20 people going on these trips, and I asked them, I said, you need to clarify that for me. And they said they run a lottery based alphabetically. On one trip, it's like A through M, and then M through Z, and then they do the middle. And those are based on people's last names, and they go through, do you want to go on a trip, do you want to go on a trip? And once they reach the capacity of the bus, then they're on standby. So, I mean, there's a methodology there. It may not be the best one, but there's an attempt to try to make it fair.
Yeah, we can certainly find out the best way.
Yeah, and we've asked, and I'm directing staff to always get a update of who goes on these trips, so we'll have that for our records and be able to kind of match the names of these people that go on these trips.
We're good to have data.
Are we going to be able to solidify the driver position at some point? Because that's been an issue.
I met with him today, and hinging, a lot of the trips are going to be based on the availability of the bus. Eric's right now, he's available to drive. His only thought was 8 o'clock in the morning is too early for him. He said 8:30, 9 o'clock would work best. He's not kind of worried about the afternoons right now because he's not doing football anymore. Belmont plays Southwest next week for the championship game over at Hunter Hills High School, for your information. And that's the last game he'll be doing. And he said he'll be available for a while. You know, unless he's sick or got a family emergency or something else comes up, he won't be available. So he just have to let us know ahead of time if possible. If that case, then we may have to cancel the trip.
But you know, they don't have to go on Wednesdays, it's just when you work the trip
Right,
out.
so it needs to be, a time that the bus is available, the driver's available, and we have enough interest to fill the bus.
And the city's not needing the bus for something.
Right. So
Well, in talking to him, to clarify something, in talking to him this morning, he said that Wednesdays works out with him because he has to take out time from his other job, and he's cleared that for Wednesday trips only. He was just available last Thursday. He was just off that day, so he drove to Boone. That was a 9.5-hour trip to Boone last week. They left at 8 o'clock and got back at 5:30, almost 6 o'clock.
Wow.
So that was a long day.
And so we have one driver dedicated for this program as part-time staff, and we searched for a long time. Unfortunately, there's not a huge pool to choose from. So we can continue to advertise for a part-time bus driver so that we can have a backup for Eric. What we had done in the past is pull some of our part-time staff off of what they're already doing and asking them to take the day to drive on the bus. As we're asking them to do more and more, I'm less comfortable pulling them off of athletics or street maintenance or water and sewer to go drop the bus. So we'll continue to look for part-time bus drivers so that we can have a backup.
Is Brian at all a viable option because he holds a certification?
Brian, so we have several people on staff that have CDLs with passenger endorsements. If we take Brian, now you've doubled your cost, and you've got a huge opportunity cost because he's just lost a day of his week. So it depends on the level of services you want. We can provide it for the 24 people on the trip or the 400 people in the soccer program that day. It all depends. And I've trusted him to juggle staffing his department.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Adrian. We have a motion to adjourn.
One last thing, I've handed out an invitation from the town of Cramerton. I don't know if you received this separately, but there is an RSVP there for their dedication ceremony on Saturday, November the 10th at 10 a.m.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
So what is the difference between an email that one of the council member originates across everybody, including you and so forth, and one that you originate to everybody?
So if I'm sending you an email, like my Friday report,
Right.
or if you send an email to the council, that's just information. Where you get a little sideways on open meetings laws is if you're responding to it. So if I say, here's what we're going to do, and then Councilman Turner says, well, I don't think we should do that, we should do this, and then Councilman Folk says, no, I don't agree with that, we should do this, then all of a sudden you're discussing public business outside of the
There's got to be
process.
a way. There's got to be a way where we can have some discussion outside of the having to be physically together.
No legal
How do we
meeting.
do that?
No legal
You
meeting.
have to keep the number down to like 2 persons. You can't involve.
Can we
the
blind
whole-
copy?
Over 2, you have a quorum. Yeah, more than 2, you have a quorum.
There's gotta be a way that we can communicate and not be in violation of something.
Do we have a
There's gotta be a
One
loophole
off is
somewhere.
fine, but when you include the whole group, then that's
Okay.
a meeting.
Do we have a
Discussing
motion to
public
adjourn?
business.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
No. You didn't come to the saxophone. Definitely need something to go back to that. Quite good, 8 o'clock tonight, saxophone. 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that's crazy. We gotta be physically together that
Got a volume control on that sucker.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Yes.
They were well staffed, so they would take the lead on.
They did. They said they would take the lead.
You doing it?
Yeah, we did. I see you got the memo on the blue shirt. That's good.